Welcome to Cultures of the World, brought to you by the History Channel. Today, we will be talking about Australia and how outsiders perceive their culture. When you think of Australia, do you think of the great outback with kangaroos, alligators, and many of the world's deadliest animals? Or do you think of the laid back, big city surfer that's some of the most beautiful beaches in the world? Many will say the latter. Australian culture is being viewed more as a beachgoer than a bushman because of tourism, location of population density, and the cultural change with the new millennium. In the late 19th to early 20th century, Australian, especially Sydney and New South Wales culture was being shaped by both tourism and the introduction of the coal and steel industry. The idea of bathing and sunbathing at the beaches had become very popular as a signifier of masculinity with the help of fashion and gender-shaped attitudes. The idea of beachgoers started as more people drew to the coastal regions as sunbathing became more popular. The bush does provide tourism and excursions to remote beaches and mineral mining towns, where most of the rural population resides. The bush was strong for the Australian economy, but now imports and tourism have surpassed what the bush could provide. Since the 1980s, the population density of the five largest Australian cities has increased greatly towards the center of the city. Perth, Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, and Adelaide are all coastal cities. As the density of the population increases over the next 30 years towards the center of the city, more people become closer to the coast. The cities become interconnected with public transport, increasing the city's complexity, driving more people to these regions. The culture is shifting from being spread out into the bush to being more compacted near the beaches. The Australian population is largely urban and coastal and growing at a faster rate than the rural population, that is barely growing and even declining in some places. Globalization of Australia has moved people to the coast, showing the world that modern Australia is made of beachgoers rather than bushmen. There have been bursts of population movement into the bush through discoveries of mineral deposits. This created mining towns that have now either been abandoned or turned into tourist spots once the mining rush was over. The beach has provided a more relaxed lifestyle, while the bush is not as relaxed and isolated. In the 1990s, Australia underwent a large amount of change in the cities with the help of urban planning in the new millennium. The idea was to make a desirable future urban structure focus on containment, consolidation, and centers. Increasing population and density near city centers allows for more efficient use of resources and traveling. This new structure is drawing more people from rural parts into the city suburbs. The bush is becoming less populated, even though the large portion of the country is bush. Having a condensed and contained structure like the one in Australia gives a perspective that the bush is not habitable for large amounts of people. People in the bush can feel like they're isolated from civilization. Australia has been home to people for thousands of years. Like personal identities, national identities are ever changing and adapting to the current state. When the British arrived in 1788, they believed Australia was terra nullius, or an empty land and ready to be shaped to the ideas of their own thinking. They did this ignoring the people who already occupied the country and have been supporting both Bushmen and beachgoers' identities. As time went on and the continent became more modern, Australians have adapted themselves to be known to the world as beachgoers. Their greatest tourist attractions are beaches and coastal cities. 90% of the country's population resides within 100 kilometers of a coast, and they have an advanced urban structure to increase population within their cities. The Bushman provides an outdated view of how most Australians actually live. With the culture that most Australians are accustomed to calling them a beachgoer rather than a bushman would be most appropriate.